When the economics goes bad, we become vulnerable to bad ideas.
On the inside flap, you have something here that I thought just summed up almost every reason that I do this show and talk about these issues and love what you do. It says, we're living through a postmodern era in which the grand narratives of religion and political ideology have collapsed. In their place have emerged a crusading desire to right perceived wrongs and a weaponization of identity, both accelerated by the new forms of social and news media. Narrow sets of interests now dominate the agenda as society becomes more and more tribal, and as Murray shows, the casualties are mounting. Now I'm going to slowly take off my glasses. How was that? That was pretty good, right?
Unbelievable.
I'm like Anderson Cooper. No, that little synopsis right there, I think, is exactly what's on everyone's mind these days, that a small few have somehow taken over all of the narratives. So I guess my first question would be, when do you think this all started?
I think it's a phenomenon of the last decade. I think that it starts in earnest after the financial crash of 2008. We when we look back at history, causes of revolutions and so on, we know that when the economics goes bad, other things happen. And I think that we pretend at the moment as if the crash sort of didn't happen or didn't have an effect in our culture. And of course it did. Of course something like that's going to. And I say in the introduction to The Madness of Crowds, it's not a surprise that young people who can't accumulate capital in their lives don't have any particular love of capitalism. And it's not surprising that a generation that finds it incredibly hard to get on the property ladder, for instance, is going to be susceptible to ideologies that claim to be able to solve every inequity on earth. So my view is that when the economics goes bad, we become vulnerable to bad ideas. And the ones I write about in The Madness of Crowds, I think these ideas have been gestating since at least the 1980s. These things that we now know as identity politics, intersectionality, possibly the ugliest word in the language, and these have been hanging around since about the 80s. But they only come flooding in the last decade. And then in the last 5 years, as you can prove, and I lay out some of it in the book, in the last 5 years, that's when all this stuff actually became weaponized.
Yeah.
And when it started to be used as a real battering ram.
All right, so first off, thank you for actually saying the title of the book. That was very unprofessional of me. It is called The Madness of Crowds. You are correct right there. So that's an interesting theory that you've laid out, that basically these ideas, these sort of bad ideas and totalitarian ideas, that they've been sitting there, but it takes something else, in this case an economic crash, to bring them up to the fold. So you think if the crash had not happened, you think that basically would have been a buffer to just kind of keep these ideas under our normal layer of discourse?
Well, I think so. I mean, it's been on my mind for many years as I've noticed this sort of intrusion into the public space of these ideas and of these weaponized identity groupings, of people being used against each other, gay people seeming to be used for something to hit straight people, and people of different races being used against each other, and women being used against men. This horrible thing we've been through in recent years so many times. And when I started looking into the intellectual origins of some of this, I sort of assumed that there were serious texts, and that these ideas came from a serious place. And I was sort of stunned when I started looking into it that really it's a lot of assertions that are being made in these texts. There's a famous foundational text of intersectionality called Unpacking the Knapsack, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. And I sort of thought this, by a professor at Wellesley, I sort of thought, well, this must be some kind of serious, attempt at something. I might be wrong, but no, it's not. It's a few pages of assertions. And that started to make me particularly interested, because I thought, well, how did a few assertions by one Wellesley academic become a sort of one of the bases for something that is now being tried out everywhere? And the real shock to me as I was researching this book was this isn't just, it broke out from these sort of liberal arts colleges like, Wellesley and a few sort of places like Berkeley, and Judith Butler and this sort of stuff. It broke out from there, but we now see it being flooding through, among other things, the corporate world. And that was a huge, I mean, I'm just amazed at the extent to which this has gone through that now. I mean, you know this, but the only people who don't think that this stuff is coming towards them are people who are basically self-employed and don't have much connection with other people in an office or anything. But everybody else knows that through human resources departments, commitments to diversity, all of this sort of thing, this is all coming for them. And I'm just amazed, as I say, that a set of ideas, which as we'll come on to, are provably wrong, are provably not going to work, and contradictory, self-contradictory. It's just amazing to me that this should have flooded through governments, corporations, as if it's something that might work when it can't.
When you were doing the research for the book and you found some of these documents, which as you're talking about, the genesis of intersectionality, it's a couple pages basically. In a weird way, would you have preferred to have found a solid foundation to argue against? Something that even if you disagreed with all of the outcomes, that you would have been able to fight in sort of like an even way, as opposed to fighting something that because it's not foundational, you're just kind of fighting all over the place.
Right. That's what I assumed. I thought this is going to require some, serious delving and so on. And I just, as I say, I was amazed at this. That what's more, I mean, the academia bit in a way is the most sort of tedious part of it for obvious reasons, because once this breaks into the pop culture world, for instance, then it becomes, we're talking about mass entertainment and indeed I think mass derangement when some of these ideas go into the pop cultural world. But these claims made, the foundational claims, are among other things written in the type of academic jargon that is so bad that it's clear that it is prose intended only to do one of two things. The first is to hide a meaning because there isn't one. And the second one is to write this badly because the author knows that what they're saying isn't true and they're trying to cover over the fact. But I give examples, and I did the audiobook for this book. And I mean, just reading some of them out aloud, I kept corpsing in the sound booth because, they are such ridiculously badly written texts. And as I say, I give examples, but this is fraudulence on a massive scale.
Okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to dive into it. And one of the beauties of the book, actually, is the way you lay it out is such simplicity. And in fact, you really only have 4 chapters here, which then you have some interludes for, but it's really 4 main ideas. But I'm going to put my fake glasses on for just one more moment here, because I want to read the 2 quotes at the beginning of the book, because I feel you started us off beautifully here. You said this is a quote: "The special mark of the modern world is not that it is skeptical, but that it is dogmatic without knowing it." That's G.K. Chesterton. And then this next one: "Oh my gosh, look at her butt. Oh my gosh, look at her butt. Oh my gosh, look at her butt. Look at her butt. Look at it, look at it, look at it. Look at her butt." By Nicki Minaj.
En Minaj.
En Minaj. Yeah. Douglas, why those 2 quotes? And now I'm putting the glasses away, my friend.
Yeah, that's the epigraph page. I sort of thought it signaled what I was planning to do and what I hope I have done in the book, which is in part to just show people what's going on. I go in the chapter in Women. I go into the issue of Miss Minaj,
let's hold that for a second. Yeah.
The G.K. Chesterton quote, it seems to me incredibly apposite to the point I'm trying to make. That we have an extraordinary set of dogmas in our time. We're as dogmatic as any age, but it requires, I think, somebody to step back and say, what are the dogmas? And I just have decided that it was worth putting them down. The 4 that I see most closely: gay, which is the first chapter; women, the second; the third is race; and the fourth is trans. And we we basically, if I could sum up what I'm trying to do with this in a nutshell, it's that I think we are pretending to know about things we don't know about, and we're pretending not to know about things we all knew till yesterday. And these two things simultaneously are one of the reasons why our societies are dementing ourselves.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.